From terror in the terminal to cartels with cargo, we at ATC cover all there is to know about crime in the concourses of Hartsfield-Jackson Airport in Atlanta. But today, we're bringing you a special story from the skies.
30 cleared for takeoff.
Alright, 130, 130, clear for takeoff, 31 center, southwest 1772.
Southwest 1436, Midway Tower, company's going land 4 right, runway 31 center, line up wait.
Have you ever witnessed something you weren't supposed to see? What would you do if you caught your sibling sneaking out of the house to go party? Do you tell your parents and exact justice, risking your brother's wrath? Or do you stay silent, content to live your life pretending as if what you saw never even happened? Now imagine if you had witnessed a murder instead of a simple sneaking out. How far would you go for justice? And what if it could cost you your life? This takes us to Flight 3323, where 38-year-old Weasel Blover is flying under the protection of a bodyguard to make it in time for a groundbreaking trial in New York. At 10:15 a.m. on August 18, 2021, Delta Airlines Flight 3323 took off from LAX, as did the murderous aspirations of multiple assassins aboard this tragic journey. Although the plane would make an emergency landing in Atlanta 4 hours later, Blover would not make it back on the ground still breathing. I'm your host, Greg Derby, and you're listening to ATC. Welcome to today's episode, Last Breath. Before we take to the skies, we'll hear from ATC's designated investigator, Ali Robin, here to tell us a little more about Blover and how he ended up in this situation in the first place.
So, one of the most important questions to answer right now would be what Blover witnessed. While on a midnight jog through Central Park during a work trip to New York City, he actually saw a murder taking place in which a Delta Airlines employee was brutally killed. The suspects of this crime are 5 teenagers who, at the time of the flight, were awaiting trial. However, according to Blover, the murderers were not a group of teenagers, but a couple of adults, which contradicted the trajectory of the case. In Blover's recount of the event, 2 men stabbed the victim repeatedly. At this point, Blover did not know he had stumbled into an elaborate scheme of which the details will soon be revealed. All he knew was that he wanted to step up and clear the teenagers of being charged with murder. He immediately contacted the authorities to notify them of his information, and because of what he had found, Blover became a key witness of the case. He was set to return to New York as someone who could testify in trial.
Blover boarded Flight 3323 with the intention of flying to New York to aid in the trial. He sat down in seat 18C and the flight took off with no problems. But the first of 2 murder attempts was just about to begin. About 45 minutes after takeoff, flight attendants began pushing drink carts down the aisle to serve drinks to passengers. One of these flight attendants was Jeffrey Danner. Jeffrey Danner had been recently unemployed and had taken up the job as a Delta flight attendant only 2 weeks prior. He had just completed training and had made a special request to be on this flight. Eventually, Danner made his way to seat 18C, where he innocently offered to pour a drink for Blover. What Blover didn't know was that the Diet Coke he was about to receive was laced with poison, with the intention to murder him. But what Danner didn't know was that when he moved on from seat 18C, Blover decided that he wasn't thirsty and that he really didn't need that Diet Coke. Instead, he passed it to his bodyguard in seat 18D. 10 short minutes later, the bodyguard would be knocked out, presumably sleeping, but to our knowledge, dead. Our investigative reporter, Ali Robin, sat down with Danner for an interview to understand the motivations behind this horrible attempted murder.
Can you explain your motivations behind attempting such a crime?
Well, I can't tell you much more than you already know, but I will tell you that I felt it was the right thing to do. He was a threat to someone I was trying to protect. They promised me a job as a flight attendant, so I took it as an added opportunity. I didn't even know who Blover was, but maybe that made it easier.
I see. Can you tell me how you got this job?
I was approached by a man in a hat wearing a dark trench coat. I still don't know who he really was or how he knew who I was, but he offered me a job. He handed me a blue business card with that red triangle and said to call him if I wanted to get the job done.
Interesting. Was this man from Delta Airlines?
Yes, he was.
So, after you were hired, on the day of Glover's murder, what is your account of the events?
So I entered the staffing areas after I clocked into my regular shift. The poison I used had already been loaded onto the plane by Delta, so all I had to do was fulfill regular flight attendant duties and just slip the poison into his drink. Funny though, I can barely remember his name, but I do remember he asked for a Diet Coke. Anyways, when I returned to his seat, he was already dead. Everyone thought he just fell asleep.
After further investigation into Danner, we actually found out some pretty interesting information. In a video posted on social media of protesters standing outside the courthouse where the teenagers are standing trial for murder, Danner can actually be seen in the crowd holding up a sign that says in all caps, "Lock them up." We also found out that Danner is the cousin of one of the murderers who Blover witnessed in the park killing the Delta employee.
So, our sources say your cousin was one of the people involved in committing the murder. Is this the person you say you were trying to protect? Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I didn't want him to get in trouble for it, you know? So I tried to silence the only one who could get him incarcerated.
Not only does this further incriminate Danner in the case, it also seems to imply that Delta may have more involvement to this than meets the eye. The poison drink by Danner would not be the only attempt on Blover's life that day. What he didn't know was that behind him in seat 19C was Beverly Abbott, another attempted murderer. Abbott had smuggled in a syringe of a neurotoxin disguised as insulin. She had got it through security by keeping it under the TSA 3.4 ounce limit and said she had diabetes. Here's Babbitt's accounts of the events from a sit-down interview with investigator Ali Robin.
So, tell me, Beverly, what really happened on that plane?
I was hired out by Delta to take someone out for them. Keep the secret. They said that this guy saw something he shouldn't have, and he was on his way to New York to testify in that massive trial against Delta. They paid for my tickets and gave me a blank check to get whatever I needed. I told them I always wanted to take a vacation in New York City.
We've reached out to Delta, but they have made no comments.
Was the money really enough to make you want to commit this murder? You had a secure job and a pretty stable life back in LA.
I guess. It doesn't make much being a nurse. I still have debt from college, and I've been at it for about 2 years now. I got my degree and RN license in about 3 years, but I swear that balance never really seems to go down. The money would have been able to pay that off and so much more. RNs don't get paid enough to live in LA. Better be stuck here, I guess. At least I know I got a bed and food for at least 10 years.
So, how did you do it? Carry out the murder?
Oh, it wasn't even that hard. I sat behind him. Delta gave me all the info I needed. So I bought the seat behind him. It was like 19C or something. I made my move by about halfway into the flight. It was later in the afternoon, so people were sleeping. He was out too. I looked around to make sure no one was looking, and I uncapped the syringe and stuck it to his neck. There was a pillow there, but I felt some resistance, but I felt the needle break the skin and inject it, so then I capped the syringe and stuck it back into my bag. I got it in because it looked like insulin, and so I was like, oh my god, I literally have diabetes, don't even worry about it. So I acted like I was taking a nap right afterward, but I kept getting annoyed at this kid. He was running around for a good portion of the flight, and I was waiting for his parents to grab him. Kids these days, and that parents don't even take care of them. I wasn't really concerned for the kid, but he made it hard to find an opening to inject the needle. At some point he shut up, but not too long after that, the cabin depressurized. From there, it was an emergency landing in Atlanta. I noticed the whistleblower never really put on his mask. By the time they got us off the plane, the police pronounced him dead. But then they started searching us and questioning us, literally interrogating us so much, so invasive, and it all took a while. At some point, they saw holes in my story and searched my bag, and they were like, why does a non-diabetic need to carry an insulin pen? Literally what?
So, you've heard of the other assailants on the plane, right?
Oh yeah, Jeffrey, what was his name? Danish?
He claims he should be accredited for the kill. Jeff says he killed Blubber by poisoning
No. I was the one that killed him. The witness never drank that cup. I literally didn't even see it. He gave it to the bodyguard.
Abbott's attempt was unsuccessful only because of unlucky circumstance. Brower had brought a neck pillow with him on the flight, which he used for the duration of the journey while he napped. This prevented Babbitt from successfully injecting the needle with the neurotoxin in his neck, although Beverly's account suggests otherwise. At this point in the flight, both assailants believed they had successfully taken Blover out. However, he was just fast asleep in seat 18C. Meanwhile, another situation had been developing on the flight. 6-year-old Owen Dedrick, self-proclaimed wild child and insane toddler, had been gorging on the plane's entire supply of Biscoff cookies for the past 2 hours and was now on an insane sugar high, running up and down the aisles like a crazed maniac. Many passengers posted this commotion to TikTok, as heard in this video. Captain Neil Legstrong was able to give us his personal recollection of the events that occurred when this child went on a rampage throughout the aircraft.
Here with me, I have the captain of that flight, Captain Neil Legstrong. So, tell me, Captain Neil, what really happened on that plane?
Well, it was supposed to be a normal flight like any other. I loaded up with the flight crew and co-pilot, but I did notice one of the flight attendants seemed to be guarding the food cart like his life depended on it. He was kind of sweaty too. Later, as we loaded passengers, there was also one woman who kept eyeing another passenger like she was angry at him. Most of the flight went pretty well, but near the end of cruising altitude, before we needed to start our descent, my co-pilot told me he needed to use the restroom. So he got up and opened the door, and that's when the kid barged in. He ran straight into the controls. He just crashed and bumped his head all over the emergency panel. And next thing I knew, the emergency hatch popped off, depressurizing the plane. From there, we took appropriate emergency procedures and landed with Mayday clearance into Hartsfield-Jackson. But by the time police came and calmed down the situation, the passengers in 18C and 18D were deceased.
Thank you, Captain Neil.
Thank you.
As stated in the captain's recollection, when the plane emergency landed in Atlanta, the passengers in 18C and 18D were dead. But the question was, how? According to the autopsy conducted by coroners, the bodyguard had died via poisoning and Blover had died via asphyxiation. In the chaos following the cabin depressurization, Blover was left sleeping and suffocating and suffering from hypoxia from lack of oxygen. Since his bodyguard was already dead and no one else around him was working in his best interests, he was unable to put the oxygen mask on and died. In the end, the witness only met his demise because of an unfortunate turn of events caused by a crazed child, not as a result of multiple nefarious plots by relatives and rich men to cover up another murder. While Blover may have passed away on the plane, unable to now stand witness at the trial for the teenagers, it turns out that was not exactly what he was making the trip for. He was actually a witness of something much more important. See, when he had passed by the murder in Central Park, he found a USB on the body of the Delta employee left behind by the killers. This USB contained scathing information on Delta's CEO that could tank shares and take down the company once and for all. This explains why Delta went out of their way to take out Blover and the employee who was originally murdered. From this information discovered by our investigators, we're able to understand that Blover was on his way to New York not just to free the teenagers who are wrongly accused of murder, but to uncover this information and present it to the courts on Delta's crimes. However, Blover's death did not prevent this. He was smart enough to carry the USB on his possession, hidden in his coat pocket. The USB was recovered during the autopsy and was not only able to incriminate Delta's CEO and the company for their heinous crimes, but Blover had also included a full testimony of what he witnessed in Central Park, and the teenagers were able to be freed. Due to the national attention of the plane emergency, the USB in the witness's possession was used as evidence in the Park murder case, and the teenagers were acquitted of the crime, and the megacorporation, Delta, was put on trial both in court and by the media and general public. Both assailants were caught and arrested and are now both facing lengthy sentences in prison. Beverly awaits her trial inside of California State Prison of Los Angeles County. If she is found guilty for attempted first-degree murder, the charge holds a maximum sentence of life in prison. And that's all for today's episode of ATC. Thank you for joining our deep dive into this intriguing case.
Thank you, sir. You guys have a nice day, and thanks for the help. Switch 996, the vehicle's clear, runway 31 center, cleared for takeoff, turn right heading 1.
Before you go, here's a quick word from our sponsor.
Sit back, relax, and fly with Delta Airlines, where our passengers come first. Our team makes quality and safety our top priority. Not only do we fly Southwest, but we go north and east too. The only Spirit that will be flying is yours when you die.
Delta Airlines is not responsible for any injuries, harm, or death caused by our flight's food or service members. Customers accept any risk associated with flight.